So today, what we're going to do this morning is we're going to talk about manure management. And I think that's a very important topic if you're in agriculture, even though you don't have livestock. Then we're going to talk about ProfitProAG, which is an excellent technology for feed and water, additive for livestock that we've been getting really good response from with the customers we're working with. And then we'll take a break, and at that time we'll have different people stationed, and if you have questions you can talk to them. Like Dennis will be over here on the area of doing soil analysis and recommendations on that. Chris will be over with the manure. Larry will be in the ProfitProAG area. And so you can go around and ask him some questions if you want to. And then we'll come back, we'll talk about controlling the controllables briefly as a summary of what we went through yesterday. Got a handout for that. And then we'll talk about the recipe for success, how you can develop your own, tailored to your farm. And so don't hesitate to ask any questions as we're going through it. Introduce this gentleman over here, Mark Dodd. Mark is with Pacific Grow. He's the one that we buy the fish fertilizer from. And we've handled a lot of different type of fish fertilizer over time. And some of it has been very difficult to work with. Very smelly. If you don't use it right away, it creates a problem in your tank. This fish fertilizer is the top of the line. It has hardly any odor to it. It's a pleasant odor. It's really a high quality material. There's two different, one really high in phosphate, and then one is what we use with the residue program or our foliar program. It has a lot of chitin in it. And so Mark will have a chance maybe a little later to talk to us a little bit about that. About 75 to 80% of the products we handle in the company can be organically approved. Some are Armory approved, some are WSDA, State of Washington. Others we got to submit information to the certifier to get approval. We have an early order cash discount program, which means if you want to order early, you can see the discounts that are available to you. And that would be anything for 2022 crop input program, all the way from the fall harvest through. It doesn't include any of the manure treatment products or the bulk fertilizer products. We probably are going to have to raise our prices. We're looking at that. Everybody we're working with is raising their prices. It's really an economy right now. We really don't know where it's headed, but we'll all get through it. I thought we had a fun day yesterday. The weather cooperated. Are there any questions that are lingering that anybody would like to ask this morning? Yes.
This would be related, is Matt here?
To who?
Matt?
No, he's not.
Okay. This would be related to Matt's. He said when he fertilizes in the fall, he moves over 15 inches. So that means he's driving on all of his stubble every fall.
Right.
So that's got to be hard on his tires, I would assume. Because he said he didn't have a chopping corn head. I was going to ask, what does he do for his stalks? Like if he's fertilizing on corn stalks, does he do anything to knock the stalks over before he does it?
He's got one of those apparatuses that fits on front of his tractor.
Okay, stalk stuffer.
Yeah, right.
And so then my other question was, when he's going out and putting in cover crop, then he's putting fertilizer and stuff right where the cover crop is. So isn't he kind of destroying cover crop again too?
Yes, and we've done that for years with him, okay. But the cover crop tends to grow back and the roots tend to grow back in that zone, and it's worked very well for him.
Okay.
Yeah. And then that kind of makes it easier next year to come through and freshen it, and then plant. Yeah. Any other questions? We are a dealer for Albert Lee Seed House, so if you need cover crops seed, we'd be happy to work with you. In your packet is our cover crop information that talks all about cover crops and making the decision of what cover crops you need, and et cetera, et cetera. And we'd be more than happy to work with you on that and provide you some guidance. Cover crops, as you know, is kind of a area where everybody has their own opinion and way of doing things and making it work. There's no one set way for everybody to do cover crops. It depends on a lot of things that go into making that system work. If you want to get refractometers, all you got to do is go online. You can find all kinds of them. In fact, this one that I got up here, I think it's less than $20. And then you can go and get a garlic press. These are going to run a little over $300. I like the electronic version. It compensates for temperature. And I would recommend that everybody have one and use it. Don't get discouraged if you don't get high readings initially, but at least it's something you know where you're at and something you can work at over time. It doesn't happen overnight. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get started and talking about a subject that's very dear to my heart because we put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this. We've been in it over 20 years. And I think we've got the top of the line and when it comes to biological manure treatments that's in the market today, and probably the knowledge and the service to go with it. So in our manure treatment business, we talk to a producer and they come to us in many different versions, usually under some kind of situation they're dealing with. They want solutions to it, may be losing pick capacity or crusting or flies or foaming. There's all kinds of issues that come with handling waste. And the thing is, anytime you have waste in containment, you've got to be very, very careful. Here's, in the last August 11th, 3 young men in Ohio died from pit gas. Just this weekend, Monday morning right away, I got a call from Charlie Kolash in Whittemore, Iowa, just west of Algona. Another one was lost to pit gas. This is an outside lagoon. He was pumping, or stirring because it was foaming. And they had manure in it, and they put some peptide in there. And he went to agitate to knock the foam down. And when he got out of the tractor, he dropped dead. The hydrogen sulfide had to be over 100 parts per million. Larry Versteeg can share with you his experience. And maybe we'll have him do that when he comes up to talk about biorig. But he had a very close encounter in a swine facility. If his son hadn't been there, he probably wouldn't be sitting in that chair. So this is nothing to take lightly. Right, James? James had a building blow up, one of his finishing barns. This methane gas that is formed in these finishing barns, when you get that meringue foam, is 80% methane. All you need is a spark. And there's all kinds of versions of stories you've heard, from a blue flame from this end of the building to the other and then bouncing back and burning everything plastic in the building, even the curtains. So I always tell anybody, if you have livestock and you have manure in a pit or lagoon, treat it biologically. It's a biological process. Now we're back to the microbes again as being the base to balancing. Okay? And you need to tell people this. If you have neighbors or relatives that have manure confinement of any kind or waste, that they should be treating it. And there's a lot of reasons we'll share with you why you need to do that. But that's, to me, is a very important one. So what we do is we talk to the customer and find out, again, what are the situations on your farm, what are the issues you're dealing with, so we know what we need to do to put a program together. And we have a whole arsenal of a toolbox that we use, that we put together over a 20-year period of time. And then we tailor-make that to his specific situation, his specific barn or lagoon, and the gallons and the issues he's facing, and we write a plan. We lay out the benefits, we lay out the treatment schedule of what he needs to do on an annual basis. And then we're on call 7/24. Anybody can call us at any time. Come up here, Chris, and sit on the stool here. And there's situations that happen, like I've had a couple cases where I'm working with a dairy producer, and I got a good program for him, and things just aren't working right, and I forgot to ask him one important question. Are you using copper sulfate? Because they'll use copper sulfate foot baths, and of course that's very hard on any microbial activity. But we run into all kinds of scenarios. The other thing we do as a company that's unique is we have a service. And probably this, Chris right here, knows the livestock industry and the manure business better than anybody out here today. He's seen it all, and he's kind of ahead of it for the company. And we have a service where we have, like in fact, right now they're loading, and we got a 1-ton truck with a flat box on it, and he'll take 2 to 3 totes of liquid, and he'll go out, and we're treating beef barns, we're treating dairies, and we go in there and we take care of it for them on a yearly basis, and they don't have to worry about it. If there's an issue, it's our problem. And they love that. And I think that part of our business is really going to grow. And so...
Yeah, currently, well, this morning Dave's headed to Waterloo, Iowa, so, but our ventures take us all the way to Ellsworth, Wisconsin, to clear over, pretty near to Brookings, South Dakota, down to Sioux Falls, down to Iowa Falls, Iowa, and then back up north of Rochester. So, and everywhere in between. So, yeah, we do a lot of swine barns. Beef barns becoming really popular, the slatted beef barns. And then we do a fair few dairies. We're gaining some popularity and a lot of interest in Wisconsin right now with our new recruit out there. So we had just signed up a 10 million gallon lagoon out by the Fond du Lac area of Wisconsin. So we hope to grow and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, we just hired another guy. He worked for Tagline Dairy that we worked with. We've been there about 10 years, and they had a major problem. There's people out here doing really silly stuff with manure, like they're putting chelating agents in it so it drops all the solids to the bottom, so they got liquid on top. They can use for flushback water or this, and it creates an odor problem, and then you got a heck of a mess in the bottom of the lagoon. And Tagline Dairy was kind of that way, and after 3 years we turned that around, and John learned how to work with that. And then that led to us getting in there with the biorig, and then with the UBO and the drinking water, and now we're doing the recipe for success. And I told John, I said, John, you get 10 big dairies and 5 medium-sized dairies, and you got $1 million business. Because we can work the full circle and really help that dairy. So the opportunities out in the marketplace for us are just unbelievable. It's all about reach. And the sad part of it is, where do we go to hire people like Chris or like Dennis that understand all this without spending 4 or 5 years training them? That's our really, the main issue we have as a company as far as growing. But yes, so what we're really trying to do here is get more, obviously, from every acre, every animal, and every gallon of manure. And we talked a little bit about this, but this CAFO thing and the ability to grow and expand in an area, if you're a grower or somebody like Christensen Farms or Iowa Select, if you're not taking care of that barn and the neighbors have a constant fly or odor problem, they're going to fight you if you want to grow and expand. So we really got to be conscious of the neighborhood and the people we're working around, and we got to be courteous to them. And it is a full circle. It goes around. And if you understand that, you're going to be a lot more prosperous and profitable rather than trying to separate the different parts of it. And that's what's, I think, really wrong with the vertical swine industry today, is it's fragmented. And thus we have a lot of issues with herd health because how they manage the manure, how they manage the environment in the barn, how they're feeding the animals, what they're feeding the animals. Vertical integrators are very hard to work with because they don't think manure is their issue until they kill some animals or they have employee problems. So we look at it holistically, and we have a full circle in every livestock segment, whether it be swine or dairy or beef or poultry. And what goes around comes around, and you can't disconnect it. And it fits into the full circle system, as we talked about, and the advantages of doing that. And of course, right here, we got the biorig, we got the UBO in the drinking water, and of course, we got manure treatment that's involved. And so we want to treat that manure and get it biologically completely digested before we put it in the field where it has the right attributes to really enhance our system. And so we look at it from an agronomic point of view, an environmental point of view, a social point of view, and again, looking at how do we take this commodity that we have and improve it and improve its use and value. And as we all know, when we're working with manure that's putrefied, it has all kinds of issues that are involved with it. And it actually harbors pathogens. And then the flies bring those up into the animals. So, you know, all of these PowerPoints are there for you to review. So we feel we have the knowledge, the experience, effective technology, ongoing support and services, and we actually, believe it or not, we tell them we have a 100% performance assurance program. How many people in the industry offer that? Because we know, we're confident in our technology. We're confident in what Chris can do, and Dennis can do, and John can do, and I can do with these customers. And we'll stand behind it. Because if they have an issue, like say they use a heavy dose of antibiotics or disinfectants, you know, a lot of these workers in the barn, instead of using X disinfectant, they use a 10X. And then all of a sudden you got some pit issues, and they're getting some flies and crusting, and we got to sort all that out and then go in there and try to remedy that. So that's why we put the 100% performance assurance program on it. The other thing that we offer is we'll do a free on-site inspection of their manure system and actually go in and evaluate it and then put a program together for them. And again, Chris has done a lot of work with these beef facilities, these pitted barns. We're working in a barn down at Andover, Iowa right now, where has been people lost and cattle lost over the last 10 years. And we've totally turned that facility around. These beef barns with the deeper pits and all the roughage, I mean, they go anaerobic on the bottom, and you got a major hydrogen sulfide problem. Hydrogen sulfide, over 100 parts per million, can drop you in probably less than 3 to 5 minutes. It's nothing to mess around with. So the service is something that, again, we offer, and this is really a growing part of our company. We would like to expand that. We've got a very good man right now that goes out and services it. And maybe, Chris, you could just take a minute and describe this diagram of how do the microbes work in a pit or a lagoon. So what if you want to use a pointer right here,
Sure.
right here.
Sure.
So explain to them how this works.
Okay. So yeah, it really doesn't matter if this is a lagoon or a concreted pit underneath a facility. So you've got a lot of water in through here, whether it's from power washing or running the misters, or if it's an outside lagoon through rainwater, whatnot. But so as the pigs are up here, you know, they're going to defecate. The manure is going to drop through because it's heavier, so it's going to settle out on the bottom here. So of course, like I said, it's going to weigh heavier than water. So you get all these bottom solids down here. Those are very dense in nutrients. So sometimes what we see is if a pit isn't biologically active, a lot of these they'll just muck out and they'll sit on the bottom.
It'll go anaerobic down there.
Yep.
And that's where all your odors, and that's where the hydrogen sulfide comes from.
Yep.
But that's where all your nutrients are too.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, so what this diagram is showing here is if we can come in with our anaerobic facultative cultures, microbial cultures, they'll go down in, obviously there's the food source for them. They'll go down in there, they'll colonize, they'll reproduce, doing their thing, digesting. But anyway, as they digest and tie up these nutrients, they also gas off as well. So they're creating buoyancy. So they'll come to the top and bring these nutrients back up to the top here where they can continue to be digested. And how many of you seen a lagoon or pits that bubble? You know, that's what's happening.
You see them
there.
boil, just like
Yep.
a fish coming up. I
Yep.
mean, you'll see them boil up.
Yep.
And that's the microbes working on the bottom. Like Chris said, that's your zone down there. You got to be very careful. You don't want those bottom solids because that's where all your nasty odors come from. They create buoyancy, and that lifts it right to the top. The microbes are really the agitators. And Chris, we know that with these microbes in a lagoon, you're going to cut your agitation time by 50 to 80% by using the biologicals, because these microbes will bring all that to the top. They want to be up there, don't they, in the oxygen zone, Chris?
Yep. And we've got, and there's going to be some variables that will prevent a lot of this from happening. Couple of things, might be, there might be a higher pH involved in that pit with a lot of that water in there. Also as well, I mean, we have some products that we'll go through here that can help mitigate these issues. But yeah, why wouldn't you want this out in your field? Why wouldn't you want these different strains or more microbial diversity tying up a lot of these nutrients, making them organically stable out in your field? But yeah, a lot of the issues here in today with the gases and bottom solids, of course, bottom solids can take away from your pit capacities, and then you're a month away from harvest, and you've got manure that's already up to the slats, and what do? You've lost your pit capacity, so you're scrambling to try to find a way
And
to
then
transfer.
when you have a problem with the crust on top,
Yep,
that's where
yep,
the flies lay their eggs.
Yep.
And then they come up into the animal and they bring pathogens with it. You get a call from somebody, I can't hardly go in the barn anymore. I got to wear a mask because otherwise I come out with a full mouth of flies. And if anybody's ever worked in that kind of environment, it's not fun.
Yeah.
And
no,
think about the animals.
Yep.
And they start biting on the cattle carcasses, and it starts creating all kinds of problems.
In this spring too, I predicted that we'd have a heavier dose of flies than normal based upon two reasons. Those reasons were we had higher feed costs this year because of the corn and soybean markets. So what happens then is they look for a substitute to fill in those finishing rations. So they'll put more DDG in, less corn. So when you put more DDG in, they're so concentrated that some of the structure of DDGs takes longer to digest and break down through the animal. So a lot of that stuff will sit on top. And then also as well, some areas had a lack of moisture this year. And so these flies, they can sense, where the moisture's at, where they need to keep life going to lay their eggs. Where else but a better a sense for moisture and food in a manure pit. So they're sensing these moving into the manure pit. So, and we did have a lot more fly issues. And so yeah, like I said, there's a lot of issues that can arise if your lagoon or manure pit isn't biologically active.
Okay.
Foaming's another one we'll talk about here, and we'll talk about a lot of these when we go through our products.
Yeah. So I tell people the microbes are the agitators, so you can cut down dramatically on your agitation time, equipment, manpower, fuel, and you know, a lot of the manure equipment people don't like to hear that story because they love selling those boats or renting them for $250 an hour. And you could pay for your manure treatment by cutting back on the hours or not even using the boat. I mean, I have dairies in Wisconsin after 3 years, they don't even agitate. They just start pumping drag line. It's that. These microbes are unbelievable, and they're stirring. Now, the way it works, we talked yesterday about how microbes communicate. It's called quorum sensing. They all have a very specific function. They produce very specific enzymes for very specific purposes to go in a chain reaction. And the first thing they've got to do is detoxify. So they're dropping salt levels. They're taking out glyphosate. They're taking out, you know, the disinfectants, the antibiotics. Because if they don't do that, they can't deputrefy. And as they're doing that, they're also bringing nutrients, like Chris said, into their body. And that odor leaving a manure pit is nutrients leaving. So when the odor goes down, that means you're tying more of the nutrient into the microbial body. So when you put that in the field, it's less leachable but bioavailable. So when you're looking at environmental issues with the use of manure treatment with microbes makes so much sense. But the problem is, there's very few people that understand this concept, even at the university level. We've tried working with Iowa State. They pay lip service to it. Right, Larry? It's just so frustrating. We're out here working with these customers, doing all this, and you know they're saying, well, prove it to us, prove it to us. And we're to a point now we don't have to prove anything to them. We're just going to go do what we know is right. And so there's 3 types of microbes in our cultures. We have the aerobic on top, the facultative that can go anaerobic or aerobic, and then we have the anaerobic. And by lifting that up to the top in the oxygen, that's where most of it is really completely digested. Got a call. A story. A young man called me, March, from Ohio. He's 28 years old. He's kind of taken over the farm from his dad. And his dad had bought some manure treatment from us 5 years previous. And they had some finishing barns. They have since expanded. And he says, well, I need to get some manure treatment from you. I said, fine. We talked about it, what the issues, this and that. And so I put a program together for him. And I said, by the way, I've got this Farming the Controllables Recipe for Success. I'm going to send you to look at. I sent it to him. He calls me back. He says, I like this. He says, I'm half organic, half conventional, going to full organic. Well, he bought probably about $12,000 worth of manure treatment from me. The crop side ended up being $70,000. And then he says, I'm a manure hauler. I said, oh, you need our defoamer when you haul. So that was probably a $4,000 deal. And then he says, I haul for a big dairy. I haul for a real big dairy. They got 10 million gallons. And they got manure issues, they got bottom solids and all that. That ended up being a $30,000 sale for that dairy. So just that one call about manure ended up being a really nice relationship. So here's this picture he sent me. No more than about a month ago. He says, Jim, this is the dairy. He says, look at all the stuff on top. He wasn't mad. He was saying, we're doing it. We lifted it. The microbes lifted all that stuff off the bottom. The dairy had a problem with capacity. And the microbes would go down there and they have created that buoyancy. And they brought it all to the top. He says, boy, the dairy is happy. So they're going to be a repeat customer, no doubt. They've already bought the defoamer for hauling for both him and the dairy. And, between them, that was probably about $10,000. So, I mean, this is how the full circle, the recipe works for us in working with people. We're just not a one technology company, but we're a multi-technology company that can touch every part of that circle. And when we talk about it, we're looking at improving, obviously, improving the barn environment, the manure enhancement, the soil and crop enhancement, and improving the feed value and the quality. It's a business performance issue. What goes around comes around. And it really does work. And there's just so many attributes to it. I'm not going to go through this in detail. You have this, I believe, in your packet. But it takes you through the different value points: barn environment improvement, manure enhancement, soil and crop enhancement. We know through experience over the last 25 years that after 2 or 3 years of doing this and getting this manure deputrified, retaining more nutrients, and by the way, the microbes drop the salt level. Do you know how much salt you can have per 1,000 gallons of dairy manure? What would you guess? Dave, what do you think? How many pounds of salt can be in dairy manure per 1,000 gallons? It can be over 100 pounds. So these guys are putting on 10,000 to 15,000 pounds per acre. How much salt are they putting on? And after about 4 or 5 years of doing that, and then they're calling, agronomically, I don't know what's wrong here, but our crops are terrible, our soils are tight. And so this is how it works. Remember, microbes are there to detoxify. So in manure, sodium and chloride are floating around as ions. Sodium positive, chloride negative, or potassium chloride are floating around as ions. The microbes grab those sodium, they grab the chlorine, they bring it into their one-cell body and tie it into a compound with carbon and phosphorus and whatever they make in that compound. Now the salt levels drop. And you can measure it with an EC meter. And raw manure will start out roughly about 32. In a pit or lagoon where you keep adding, we can get it down to 15, and that's acceptable. The NPF I have over there, where we take a lagoon and we put in raw manure and treat it for the year without adding any more. We make a tea out of it that guys use as starter and foliar. We actually sell that for, what is it, Dennis? How much per gallon? 55, 60 cents a gallon by the semi-load. We taught a lot of the colonies how to do that. That has an EC of below 7, normally 5 to 6. Very, very safe. So this is what these microbes do. And this sheet is just a way of kind of talking all about it. We talked about the dangers of manure, and this is real. I can't emphasize enough to people that if you have waste in containment, you've got to look at the safety factor. This is actually a barn at Holstein, Iowa. I got involved with about, I can't remember, 8 to 10 years ago. It was the first major barn that blew up or was a problem with the methanogen foam and the methane. So they went in there because it was coming up out of the loadout holes. And I got pictures over there of it. Maybe I got a picture here. I don't know if I put one in or not. But so what they did is the custom applicator came in and he was going to knock that foam down by agitating. The guy was 10 feet from the front door that was inside the barn. When he started agitating, the spark from the furnace ignited the whole barn, blew the guy out of the front of the building, blew the building apart, killed every hog that was in that barn in a matter of 2 seconds. The guy was in the University Hospital for, I think, 6 months with burn. There was a lawsuit over this. So I came back And I spent 3 weeks studying this. Because that's what I love to do, is solve problems. And we put together Foam Away. It's a powder. It goes on at 5 pounds per 100,000 with Chris's help. And we sell a lot of that to solve this problem. You put it in the pit, and in 4 to 7 days, the foam goes down. And the safety factor comes back. James, you experienced that, right?
Absolutely.
And again, this is not child's play. This is real. And we'll get calls from people, my gosh, our hogs in a foot of foam, or the foam. We've had one last year, I believe the foam was going out the curtains, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was up to the curtains. Yeah.
Up to the curtains.
Yeah, I had 12 inches of foam in my barn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
And Chris, maybe a little bit, what is causing that foam like that to occur? What, you know, and this is kind of a trade secret because we kind of figured it out. It's a methanogen microbe that's in the gut of a ruminant animal. And Larry, what do? They create what? Methane. So it's the same critter in the pit that Chris is going to kind of explain it to you a little bit.
can you go back to that slide of that lagoon? Right there, there you go.
Okay.
So from my experience, let's just take a look at this manure pit again here. So from my experience, foaming, you never see a foaming pit that has a lot of bottom solids or top crust per se, you know, that has a lot of organic matter in it. You just, that pit has to go 80, 90, 100% liquefied, okay? So as we set the stage, you know, and you rarely see manure pits foaming that are during the winter or even the spring and cooler temperatures, just for the simple fact that you have cooler temperatures, but also there's not a lot of material, you know, manure in there. But anyway, you've got a lot of, excuse me, you've got a lot of native populations of microbes in your pit as well, whether they come out of the gut of the animal or they're just part of the ecosystem there. They could be pathogens as well. But anyway, we start to get a lot more calls for foam, usually and generally in August. And the reason why I think that is because during the build up to that point, we've built up a lot of different communities of microorganisms, whether they be good ones or bad ones. Somewhere, somehow, things got out of check. Okay, they got out of balance. And, but anyway, the point that I'm getting to here is you need certain checks of the boxes in order for all this to happen. So you need to break down a lot of the organic material, whether that's tied up or gassed off. So the manure pit is primarily liquefied. Also as well, once we get more liquefied, we become more diluted, okay? But reason why that happens in the summertime as well is we've built up those populations, like we said, to degrade a lot of the organic material. But a couple other factors as well. Summertime is hot. Metabolism is higher in the summertime. And also as well, we're at that point as well, we may have power washed that barn twice. That finishing barn on the average gets power washed almost 2.5 times a year, okay? Also as well, it's hotter like we said. We may run misters for those hogs to compensate to keep them cool. So with all that being said, we've changed, we've diluted that pit out even more. And by doing so, what I just said is we've added a lot of water. Now, a lot of water going into that pit, generally, what would you say the average pH of the water coming out of that barn, whether it's the drinker or the hose, the well, what would you say the average pH of that water is? Primarily alkaline, okay? 7.0 is going to be basic. A lot of them are 7.4, 7.8. So we've changed the pH of that pit as well. So a lot of our digestible microbes, our good ones, you know, they're more geared towards acidic conditions. So then what happens as well, once we liquefy that pit, we do have some indigestible material in that pit, or material that takes longer to digest. We primarily see DDGs being fed in those rations. DDGs contain some structures that have long chain acids in them, or material. They have higher concentrations of some material that's not as digestible. Like I said, I mentioned we talked about power washing the barn. We run disinfectants. Some of the other feed ingredients have fats and oils in them. So what happens to a lot of those? Those float on top, right? Oil floats on top of water, right? So we have microbes that have to break all that stuff down too. So since that's on top, okay, since that's on top, we have these microbes on top. I think a lot of them have been researched and classified as a methanogen microorganism. And what they're doing is they're hooking up, colonizing, reproducing, and trying to break these materials down. And they're on top like a spider web, hooked up like a spider web, floating on top, breaking that down. But they're also producing a gas as well, and that's what Larry had mentioned is methane. So, but like I said, is methane foam going to go down? No, it's going to come up. Okay, so that's where we get foam. Because I've heard of producers that, you know, hey, I had 12 inches of foam, and a week ago, now I got 3 feet. What happened? It's almost coming through the slats. First question I'm going to ask is, did you power wash the barn recently? Well, yes. Well, you threw some fuel on the fire by increasing the pH of that pit. Also, as well, is what we're finding out as well is some of these methanogens are resistant to any antibiotics, because that's the industry fix-all is if you've got foam, let's just throw some Rumensin in there. And Rumensin, I believe, only takes care of gram-negative. Some of these stories I'm hearing is, well, I threw Rumensin in and it didn't do anything, and in fact, I've got more foam than ever. Well, gram-positive, those bacteria, or excuse me, those methanogens are obviously resistant to that. So we do have a product that will help mitigate this foam, and you know, we're having really good luck, and because we've got it figured out, the 3 factors here that inhibit foam. So there's 3 technologies in the foam away, and we're having really, really good luck with it, and a lot of happy producers. So
And we'll get a call from Christensen Farms. I haven't been able to. These vertical integrators are tough because they're focused on price per pound of pig, and they don't see the manure as their issue. It's a grower issue, and no matter how I've got a 4-page document to show them all the value at the different points, and I haven't been able to break through to them. But one thing they will do, Christensen Farms or any of these, they'll call into the office and say, we need 5 shipments of the foam away to these barns today. And so we'll put that together and ship directly to those sites. And And by the way, Chris has done a really good job. Like Stutzman's in Iowa, they carry all of our products in their catalog. Bronze, we've gotten into that over in Wisconsin. That is really going to grow. So we see this part of our business really, really growing. And a lot of that is credit to what Chris has done. And so we do knock down, this just shows ammonia, knocking down ammonia here in the barn. Before treatment, we were, again, parts per million 26, after 14 days 15, 30 days 5. And this just shows the impact. And this is what I try to get the vertical integrators to understand. Okay, this is a study that was done by the University of Illinois. I know, Dennis went there, and we got to take that all in consideration. But here we came in, and we had the same weights on the pen to pig starting weight. We come in with 0, 50, 100, and 150 parts per million of ammonia. But if we look out here, this is the weight of the animals after 28 days, and this gives you the weight difference. So you can see here, these were about 11, almost 12 pounds. These were 8 pounds, and these were 2.8 pounds. So don't tell me that these gases, ammonia, don't have effect on pigs. If you're a vertical integrator, I mean, that's major. Same thing here. If you got a finishing barn, and I believe this was done by the University of Illinois too, if you got 100 parts per million of ammonia, you got a 2,000 head barn, you're going to generate, what is that, 289,000 roughly? If you drop it to 50, you're going to generate another 34,000 a year out of that barn, and you drop it less than 25, which it should, you're going to generate another $86,000 a barn. What part of money don't you understand? Okay? This is real. And I don't know why the vertical integrators can't see that. We also, if you looked at here, BOD, we're dropping that, or, here we are in, is that May 16th and August 11th? We're BOD, COD, and total dissolved solids in the barn. Hydrogen sulfide, we've talked about this already, but we have a solution. Right within our formulations, we have the sulfur-reducing bacteria. So they take the sulfides out. And this is a very important trait of our formulations. And the other thing we talked about is the impact of pathogens in manure. And E. coli is an example, often found between 3,000 and 50,000 CFUs per gram. If you biologically treat manure, we can drop that to 100 to 10. Okay? Again, what part of that, don't you understand as a vertical integrator? The other part here, in the work we've done, agronomic justification, as we look at this, let's say that we're going to give you, we say a 5 to 50% yield increase after 2 or 3 years of bioaugmenting manure, putting that out in your field with extra microbes, with reducing salt, with extra nutrients. You're going to see a 5 to 15%. So I raised 200 bushel an acre. So 5% would be 100 benefit, 350 corn, be $35 an acre. I've got a barn that has 2,400 head, 750,000 gallons. I put on 3,000 gallons per acre, that'd be 250 acres. Okay, so I increased my revenue 8,700. My cost to treat that was $430 an acre, so I've got a net gain of about $7,600. So that manure treatment's making you money, or that dairy treatment, or that beef treatment. Again, what part of money don't we understand? So this is some work that Chris did. You can see here where we treated 2016 untreated, 2017 treated out of the same barn. You can see the improvement in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Here's work we did many years ago. It's probably been almost over 20 years ago, where we came in and again measuring EC. So we took the manure down to 3.7 versus 25, which is raw manure. And then we had the control with no manure. And we put it right underneath the corn row. This was corn on corn, full replicated trial, 90 pounds N applied on the plot ahead of time. And what you'll see here is our brick level was 14. Here it is 8.7. In the control it was 6.5. We had a better pH. And over here, what really counts is yield. If the control was 100%, on the raw manure we went up 28%, but on the biologically treated manure, 47%. And you can actually see treated, raw manure, control. Here's work we did out in South Dakota with one of the colonies where they were making NPF in a lagoon and using that as a carrier. They put in 1 quart of starter, they put in the micronutrient mix at 10 ounces, and they put in the biological stimulant. And we saw a 51% improvement in root growth, and ear improvement was 36%. The other thing we talked about already is the salt levels, and we've got a write-up on that, on a tech sheet, that we do drop salt levels dramatically in these barns. Here's another picture from South Dakota, the colony we were working with that was bio-augmenting. This is their soybean field after about 3 or 4 years of using the bio-augmented manure, and this right next to them is their neighbor's field. So what a dramatic difference. So now we're into the products. So we're going to go through this rather quickly here, Chris, but this is our primary product right now, and we've had a transition probably through 8 different product technologies over the last 25 years. Every time we're improving and we're tweaking. And so we do have Manure Master Plus. That's our key product, and we had Chris develop Pit Accelerator, which was a product that would help in difficult manure to drop pH and to enhance the whole process. Well, we decided that we put them together. So we finally blended those together, and that's what we call our Manure Master Plus PA. And then we have our foam away that we talked about. This is a essential oil that we put together that is a mechanical defoamer. So when you're agitating and hauling manure, we can use this product to cut down on the foam and dramatically improve the operation of less loading time. You don't have the foaming and spillover. You go to the field with a full load. So if you're a manure applicator, once they start using it, they keep using it because it improves the overall operation. Like Doug Rollick up here by Redwood Falls. Doug is he talks about being a shitologist. He just prides himself in being the best manure hauler out there. And he runs 3 noon tanks, 10,000 gallons. And he said, "Oh, Jim, I don't know if we need that or not." So I sent him up some demo product. He calls me back. He says, "The people that work for me aren't going to haul for me if I don't use it because, man, I mean, we can pull up, we load, there's no slop over, and we go to the field with full load, we're getting done quicker, everybody's more happy. Less fuel, everything is working better for us." And that's what we experience from these custom applicators. And we're working with a bunch of those. Very, very good product. And then the manure conditioner is a dry product that we use mainly where we got a lot of bottom solids, and we put that, it drops down there and it stimulates that whole bottom area and lifts that stuff up. We always use it in a new barn. If you got new concrete, if we start by dropping this in the bottom, it soaks up all the chemical out of the cement. In a new barn, you're probably looking at 2, maybe 3 years to really get that barn going because you got all that chemical you got to get rid of, and that's hard on those microbes. You drop that in there, and it kind of takes care of it, and every barn we've done that in, Chris, I think has worked great for us, like that we've gone into with this. Mm-hmm. So again, we have this all over here, and when we take a break, Chris will be over here if you have specific questions. It's pretty well detailed. This one we use at, on average, 40 gallons per million on an annual basis. It's going to run somewhere around $1,450 a million on a million basis. So if you have a 2,400 head barn, you're probably looking at, you know, somewhere around $9,000 to $1,000 a barn. And we put together a protocol, tell you how much up front, 20%, and then the rest over the year you put in about every 6 weeks. And a very, very good product. We also have an organic version, and we can also use UBIO here, liquid manure enhancement technology. And what that does, as we talked about many times, it speeds up the whole biological process. And so we're going to use this where we have difficult situations, or it's also very, very good. They actually use the UBIO in oil wells to take out hydrogen sulfide, which is a real problem in oil fields. And in the conditioner we talked about, here's a Meyer barn, I believe, down at Northwood, Iowa, that Chris worked with. It was a new barn. We dropped that in there from day one. Worked very good. The foam away, again, we've talked about that one. Again, these are the horror stories that we get. You call up and they got it coming out of the load hull or coming up through the slots. Sometimes there's pigs in the barn, and then this is after 6 days after we use the product. Again, we're saying that up to 33% increased manure hauling capacity. So if you're like Tagline Dairy, where they're hauling out, hiring a guy to haul the manure for them, and they're bringing in tankers, and by going to the field, loading quicker and going to the field with a full load makes a heck of a lot, and then they don't need to run the boat. They told Chris and I, between the manure treatment and the defoamer last year, they figure that dairy saved $64,000. Okay? That's real money. That's real money. And again, if you have to haul manure in any fashion or form, it really speeds up the process. The other thing that we're starting to promote is using UBIO at the time of manure application. And I showed you that one chart yesterday out at the field. It's going to work in the manure just like it does any way we add it. It's going to enhance the whole biological aspect and the health of the soil. It's going to help drop salt levels. It's going to help condition that soil and stimulate the microbes. The other product that I've got in mind that I'm going to create is a combination of the chitosan with the UBIO as a at-fall manure application. And I think that could be a dynamite product. Because UBIO is very cationic. I mean, chitosan is very cationic. So it's going to latch onto the phosphorus, it's going to latch onto the nitrogen and help that situation out. Here's Dennis out in South Dakota with one of his growers, and we promote, of course, manure treatment, but also using cover crops with the manure. Here he's looking at where they planted cover crop after the manure. And so that's our story, and we're sticking to it about biologically treating manure and the value of doing that. And over here, we have a display that when we take a break, Chris will be over there if you have any specific questions. Again, what I would say is this. Now that you know the story, if you have neighbors or relatives or friends that have manure containment or waste containment, share with them what you learned, because maybe you'll save a life. And tell them there are solutions, and the solution actually will make you money. If you have control of that manure and you're putting it out on your farm ground, what's wrong with a 4-to-1 to $71 payback? Besides, you took care of the issues in the barn. Now, I think it's idiotic that we ever came up with this system of putting animals over their manure and all year long. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. But that's where we are in the industry. If I were doing it, I'd get that stuff out of the barn into an outside containment facility. But this is kind of where we are, and I think out of sight, out of mind, right? Until you got flies or you got an odor problem. Just like Charlie calling up last Monday. Right away at 8 o'clock, Charlie's calling me, Jim, we had another death in the area, and it was an old facility that I had sold. Okay? And he was just frantic, and he says, what can we do? What can we do? Well, you really should have done something before this happened. You could have saved a life. And, I mean, how many more deaths do we need to have? I mean, I've got a hauler 8 years ago, his son was coming into the business. He was about 35 years old. And they were pumping on a site that was kind of down in. And so he filled the load, and he felt kind of dizzy, but he thought, well, I'll shut the agitator off and I'll go to the field. Well, his dad found him. He got to the field driveway. The tractor was still in gear, sitting there, idling kind of, and he was slumped over the wheel with blood coming out of his mouth. Now, he didn't die, but he couldn't work in the business anymore because he becomes sensitized to it. And when Larry comes up, we'll maybe have him tell his story too. So, again, Chris is the expert. If you got anybody that wants help, give Chris a call, and we're more than help. You know, do your neighbors and friends, tell them, hey, if you have livestock of any kind with manure containment, you need to call Chris. Just do that, and you may help somebody. Yeah.
What does outside pits and rainwater and stuff do to the whole situation compared to pits under a roof where you don't get rainwater to dilute it? Does it make much difference?
Well, generally a lot of the finishing barns have pits underneath them.
Right.
And generally, a lot of the outside structures are going to be like sow units, particularly like farrowing units only have a shallow pull plug underneath them. So they've got to transfer that manure to another pit, or primarily you see a lot of farrowing facilities that have lagoons on them. Those lagoons, in my opinion, have less solids in them, just for the simple fact that if they're not treating their manure in these sow units, these sows are caged into stalls, so when they defecate, it just drops to the slats and then it just stays there. Because a lot of these sow units as well, so with that in turn, there's not going to be as much manure out in these lagoons, so they're going to be more diluted. But a lot of these sow units, they do not agitate. They do not come in and agitate for two simple reasons. Is they don't want to stir and agitate and produce gas in these barns that can gas, 250, 500 sows into a room, or, that in turn they could gas a worker, or that gas may linger up to another day or two in that facility as well. A worker comes in the next day and it gases him. So I guess to answer your question, there's some differences there, but we can come into these sow units and treat these sow units with some of our products. And we're working with some management companies and some vet clinics that are actually treating, and they're seeing less odors, less gases, and removing some of these bottom solids from a natural approach rather than, taking the risk to agitate those. Also as well, some of these sow units, you're fine. But anyway, a lot of these sow units that have a lot of these bottom solid issues, what we talked about, do not want to agitate, and they've let it go so long that it's taken away from pit capacities that now they'll try to clean these barns out the best they can during pump out. There'll actually be contracted crews that will come in and go down and manually dredge these out. And I mean, some of the quotes are like $250,000 to do that, $200,000 to literally remove all the bottom solids by hand. So we've got some of these sow units that are treating for, you know, a 1/16 of that cost, and they're seeing reductions up to, you know, 8 to 12 inches per treatment, you know, or per season. So.
Okay, well, thanks. So if you have any specific questions, we're going to have Larry up here, and then we're going to take a break and then ask Chris. Chris, if you could give the mic to Larry,
Yep.
please.